Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce the speaker for this section, Lene Louise. Lene Louise is going to present her research proposal involving the delay, exploring the delay in military veteran disability processing, a qualitative study. So let's welcome Lene Louise.
Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. My name is Lynette Lewis, and I thank you for being here, and I really appreciate your patience. I was having some technical difficulties, as I'm sure we've all experienced now during COVID, so I won't keep you too late. So let's get moving. Again, thanks for coming to my presentation and my research on exploring the delays in military veteran disability processing. A qualitative study is the name of it. Again, thanks for being here. About myself, I am a PhD student in the area of human services. I'm a United States Air Force veteran, a published author on Amazon, a painter, and a poet. In the future, I definitely plan to run for Senate to address the gaps that exist in education to assist vulnerable populations. Next screen, please. The VBA, the problem statement, is the delay in the claims processing time for military veterans. So let me take you on the VBA happy path of claim processing. Some of you guys may know the Veteran Administration is just that, but it's really divided into three entities. So the one I'll be talking about today, I'll be referring to is the Veteran Benefit Administration, known as the VBA. So what happens here is the disability applicants for the military veterans, they file for benefits. They can file up to 9 months before transitioning into the real world and before leaving the military. When they apply for benefits, they can either apply online, by mail, or actually in person with the assistance of a veteran service officer. So then their disability claim goes through several stages before disability determination is even made. Once the claim is submitted, the claim is assigned to a veteran service representative, and they help follow out the claim. The VSR then receives the claim and decides whether or not there's enough information. At this time, the military veteran gets to list all of the medical doctors they've seen, personal, and the ones on base they can refer to. So then the VSR, which is the Veteran Service Representative, processes the claim by reaching out to all the doctors listed by the veteran. The VSR then sends notices to request medical records from various personal agencies and federal agencies and personal doctors. And if there's not enough information, once the records are requested, then that veteran is sent for a C&P exam. At that exam, they are validated to see, well, how sick is the veteran? What exactly is the problem? And are they eligible for a rating? After the exam has been completed, the adjudicator will review all evidence in the veteran's file for completeness before sending it to a veteran service representative. The rating veteran service representative will then rate the claim and make a decision on the claim. Okay. Next, we have the purpose statement. The purpose of the proposed qualitative exploratory multiple case study is to understand the adjudicator's point of view of the delays in the VA disability claim processing. The study population that was sampled were adjudicators who have previously worked for the Veteran Benefit Administration. This will ensure that the participants had enough experience to provide insight into the issues that are causing delays in the study. Now, something that I really wanted to mention early on, I wanted to give you a couple statistics just to put in perspective of what we're dealing with here. Okay. At the end of 2018, the VBA had about 364,000 disability compensation rating claims waiting for completion. In addition to that, the VBA had to correct 676,000 claims in 2018 as well. Then in 2019, an audit was performed, and there were about 364,000 disability claims just sitting there. And out of those 364,000, 19,000 needed reevaluations. So they were just waiting for years. And the problem seems to really be worsening and growing. Next slide, okay? Conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is the foundation on which the research is established. I chose to deal with TQM, which is total quality management. This is a great tool for organizations in assessing service. How can I improve service? What tools can we use to improve service? This may be including your audience and customers to getting feedback from them through surveys, through risk assessments. And this is also about getting feedback from your employees on their recommendations on how things can be made better. Next slide, please. Research questions. So, what is the adjudicator's perspective of what is causing the disability delay? And what ideas might adjudicators have in making updates to the disability process? Those questions were really important. And they also, because I'm in the middle of my research now, allowed me to get some great information when I spoke to my participants. I'm in the middle of the study right now. Also, I wanted you to keep in mind, this is pre-COVID. My study is pre-COVID. We didn't think it was fair to do a study in the midst of a pandemic when we realized a lot of organizations had to reorg. So we wanted to give a fair assessment and not create any bias. So again, the study is pre-COVID. So from these very same research questions, I found out some great information, and I'll share just a little bit. This is just a few things that I found out. In every department of all of my participants, they stem from all different parts of the world. There were different training standards. Some of the employees had training for 6 weeks. Others had training for 6 months, right? Some of the employees that used to work for the VBA had a coach or mentor to review their claims before claims were processed. Others did not. Some employees were told to take claims that stem from 3 to 6 years ago and adjust the date to a current date so it did not make the organization look like there was a backlog. Performance standards were created for all employees, but the problem was trying to meet those standards. Some employees got sick in meeting those standards. Some retired to open up their own organizations that do the same process as the VBA. And VSRs were saying they had to use multiple systems just to process one claim. So you could use 5 to 8 different software systems just to process one claim. Next slide, please. So the research design, a case study approach was used for this to reveal the subjective experiences of these disability adjudicators and to help develop themes. Data collection was done using Zoom. I made sure that all representatives involved, all participants, they used Zoom. They signed a consent form letting them know that they would be recorded, but they would remain anonymous during the total time. So in the Zoom, we also made sure to turn the cameras off to ensure that they would feel comfortable. That was consistent across the board while my camera remained on. Also, this was a good idea in my research design, which I chose qualitative to interview. prior adjudicators because it allowed for different perspectives. And this whole research was to get the perspective of the adjudicators. Sure, there's a lot of research out there that deals with veterans not getting their benefits and delays, but it did not have a lot of research that included the perspective of the adjudicators, which we know them to be veteran service reps, known as VSRs, and rating veteran service reps, which are VSRs, right? Some other parts to this methodology is I wanted to select a strategy. We did convenience sampling. Convenience sampling is approaching people. We approached them through LinkedIn. I was able to reach out to some people and say, hey, I noticed on LinkedIn, for those of you who are not aware of what LinkedIn is, it's an online application that reveals your work experience and your education. I reached out to people that I did not know to individually to say, hey, I noticed you have on here retired, used to work for the VA. Are you interested in participating in the study? So that was a strategy of convenience sampling, having that convenience of using social media. Also, they were all interviewed, and the interview questions were about 16 questions. The final number of participants depended on the saturation. I interviewed over and over again until I started hearing the same information, and that was my cue to stop. Literally, almost on every question, I began to hear the same information, and it was enough. As far as I got all the data that I needed to be able to make some great recommendations and actually view it and evaluate it. So everything was good. Next slide, please. Limitations. What were my limitations of the study? The pandemic created a lot of limitations because we had to be careful. Zoom was what I definitely decided to immediately use to keep everybody safe, to social distance. So yes, that was the biggest limitation, is being able to still get that data, still interview who I needed to interview, and that both of us remain safe. And I was able to do that using online cameras and Zoom. Next. Delimitations are the boundaries that you actually set for your study, okay? So the focus was limited to adjudicators known as the VSRs and rating VSRs. These were all people who used to work for the Veteran Benefit Administration. I had some raters, I had some veteran CSRs, I had people who processed. They were VSRs, but they processed the payment in. I had all different types. So it was really interesting. We had open-ended questions. Those are questions that you don't get a yes or no, but they allowed me as the researcher to build, to really get detailed and make sure that I understood what they were saying and really get enough information to be able to speak to those two research questions that we saw earlier. And then I did use follow-up questions used to clarify the participants' responses. For example, when I talked about the different audits that take place at the VBA, one question that I came up with that was a follow-up, and that came up with that on the slide is, do you think it's more effective to have an audit performed by a government entity versus a non-government entity? And what is the impact of the results? And making sure that the VBA does follow up and do what they promised, they told the auditor they would do. So that's just an example. Next screen, please. Literature review. This is so very important for those of you who are new to this experience, like myself learning. Literature review is when you take different information by researchers and you synthesize, you compare and you contrast data. It's very important. When I started the literature review, I just let the material speak to me. And the three themes that spoke to me and building my research around were processing errors, backlog of claim, and the third theme is streamlining. So let me explain a little bit about what does this mean. Theme one, Okay, processing errors, the disability claims that were denied, right? For example, from April to September in 2017 were incorrectly processed according to the Veteran Benefit Administration. And what happens is there's another entity called the Office of Inspector General who completes these audits quarterly. So what they do is they pull claims during the process to say, hey, is the claim processed correctly? So in theme 1, another error was that OIG also determined that VBA incorrectly processed more than 62,000 claims. Also, out of 34,000 claims, about 29,000 claims contained errors that included improper evaluations, missed secondary conditions, and evaluations based on inadequate exams. And this is so important for our military veterans because being approved for these benefits also allows them to be approved for health insurance. So basically, some of these veterans, they go into the military one way and come out another way, right? They come out disabled. And then imagine this, then they're forced to have to wait years to get benefits. And if they come out disabled, they need the treatment, the care. So getting this disability benefit automatically approves them for that medical insurance that they need to get well. One more point I want to make about the processing errors. Out of the claims audited by the VA OIG, 28% of those claims contain evidence that was not sufficient according to the OIG, and that was incorrectly processed, right? Or exams were never requested, right? So a military veteran goes and claims, hey, I'm disabled. And the VBA says, okay, we'll send you to a doctor to verify those injuries. Well, guess what? In some cases, those veterans, even to this day, are still waiting to go see a doctor. So their claims are just sitting. Now, and I mentioned theme 2. Theme 2 deals with the backlog of claims. What is a backlog, right? A backlog is when a claim is submitted and does not get processed immediately. It just sits. And by speaking to some of my participants in the study, some areas in the world, when they process claims, they're told to process one claim at a time. So if they have to send the claim out to another department in another state for a recommendation, guess what? They're told to just sit there until that claim comes back to them. They're told not to work another claim. Other areas are told, hey, you have to work 3 to 7 claims a day, right? You have to work 3 to 7 claims a day. And the problem is when they have to send it off to another department to rate the claim, it's all about interpretation of that data because everybody in different areas of the world are getting various trainings. That's a delay. A claim can sit just because of difference of opinion. So that's another issue. Another example of backlog is the VBA has been confronting backlogs since 1993 for over 3 decades, right? They've had mandates by Congress. Congress is actually the one that gets to determine what exactly gets changed and what doesn't. So the minute there's a new rule or law, guess what? There's a new request, new standards, new information that goes untouched. There's no training to train the examiners. And guess what? It causes a delay because no one knows how to incorporate those new changes into the claim. And last but not least is the third theme, which is streamlining. Streamlining just basically says, hey, the VBA, they tried different things. They've tried to create work groups. They've built different software. They've built software that kind of sorts claims and assigns them evenly, supposedly. Then they've built systems that make it easier for military veterans to file. But after talking to some participants, that's not true. So it all kind of depends. So unfortunately, with this study, it's just been a real eye opener. It's been great. The information I learned from the participants was just great. They were all so knowledgeable, so helpful. Um, and it just was an eye opener that dates were being changed on claims. And I have to say, all of the participants left because of the stress, and they felt like they weren't being honest to the veterans, right? The veterans weren't getting the honest service they're supposed to. All my participants felt like, hey, the VBA was created for military veterans, but yet they're not being cared for like they should. They're not being treated respectfully, right? It even forced one of my participants to go open their own organization to create their own to help veteran benefits. And it's been very helpful. So to the veterans. So this is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate all your patience. Thank you. Yes, I see a lot in the chat. That is, someone said that they work for the SSA administration. Yes, training is one of the biggest problems. Yes, because the bigger the organization, the more it's split up into regions, and the more you run the risk of training being different in different parts of the world. And sometimes, understandably, you do comprehend that because you know the needs are different. Like, for instance, Florida, that's a huge retirement community, right? So the needs of Florida may be different in a sense as far as the age population, but they still need to be approved their benefits, and training should still remain the same no matter where you go. Veterans should still be able to get the same information. And apparently my participants stated that training was just a challenge. How do you see the information used moving forward? Further research, I would love to continue further research. Me being a veteran and a disabled veteran, I originally wanted to give the VBA the opportunity to speak to these things, because when I went through the process, I was hopeful. I was excited to talk to the VBA because I didn't have those issues. It was a smooth transition. I was able to get my documentation and I was approved. But this really bothered me because there were some other veterans and friends and neighbors of mine who did not have that same process. So I want to continue to, I would love to work with the VBA in the future and provide and share this information. The VBA has a lot of town hall meetings. I would love to be able to share and work with them on ways on how to create a better system if they were open and willing. I feel like I could speak to it. Also, I have experience processing claims, and I know how that kind of work can get. But I definitely would be willing in the future to use this information to share with the VA, because it provides a resolution. It doesn't just have a gripe, but it has, hey, these are the concerns, and this is what I recommend doing. So I think as I've done this research, I talked to the adjudicators. I would like to continue studying where I continue to bring in the veterans as well. But, you know, with the, by them being disabled as researchers, we just have to be careful and make sure that they're all qualified to participate. But definitely, I see in the chat, it says I had retirees who are still waiting for disabilities after leaving the service more than 10 years. Yes, I plan to get this education out there. Because I'm a published author, I plan to write a book about this and really speak on different platforms about this, you know, and really do it. But I want to be cautious on how I do it, because at the same time, I want to let the VBA know, hey, I'm not after you. I just want to work with you. And being part of the process, I can tell them the parts that are working well. And the parts that, are a little weak in some areas. But if we work together, I think this is going to be an effort where it takes people with knowledge who are in it, who are getting benefits, who are trying to get benefits, who use the process. It's definitely a collaborative effort along with Congress. We have to make sure that the people who speak to this and represent us in legislation actually have experience and knows what's going on. A lot of times I found that, and I agree with my participants, a lot of the decision makers, even within the VBA, are so far removed. They make the calls, but they've never processed the claim before. They don't know. So a lot of the tools that the VBA adjudicators and VSRs use to process were written by someone who never processed the claim. That's a huge problem, right? So they're giving orders, making these great demands, and they're losing good help is leaving out the door. And it's just because a lack of knowledge. They don't know. So I'd be willing to enlighten them, to help them, to work on some initiatives to get this up. And create systems and software that really help, that don't put a cosmetic band-aid to things, that really address the issue. It's not fair for our veterans to go out and fight the war and risk their lives and then have to sit and wait. There need to be something, and I agree with one of my participants, which was a great idea. That participant said, hey, before military gets out and they finish their enlistment, have the SO officers on base helping them get disability before they even leave the military. Have them set up on the base where they can get the help. So that way, the same time they're leaving, their disability starts right away. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to be a part of something like that. Any other questions? Okay, I think I've answered everything in the chat.
Well, thank you so much, Lynette, for your presentation. It was very insightful.
Thank you.
Quite a bit of amazing work that you have done here with your research.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here today.